We are here with ArthurCWoods, and normally we'd be over in my Facebook group teaching teens love learning, but Facebook and Zoom aren't playing nice today, so Arthur and I are here. So Arthur, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. You gotta love technology. Just
Definitely, yes. At least we had a backup plan, right? We didn't
yeah,
have to be like, yeah, we scheduled it, but not really.
yeah. It's great when it works, and then you know,
Exactly. So, well, Arthur, I know that you are a teen life coach, and I know we're talking about leadership, but I don't know if all the mamas, parents that are watching this, have met you yet. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
sure. Well, my name is Arthur, as he said, and I've been doing teen coaching for about 3 years now. Prior to that, I was a youth pastor for about 10 years. So that's where I got a lot of my experience working with middle school and high school students, and absolutely loved doing that. And when I kind of moved on from being a youth pastor, I realized I still wanted to continue to work with teenagers. And life coaching, as you know, has been around for years and years and years and years. But the teen space was a kind of newly developing area. So I was like, man, I would love to get into that space and do some one-on-one private coaching and do some group coaching. And so that's what I've been doing for about 3 years now. All the coaching is virtual. And then I also do a lot of in-person speaking and teaching. So I get to go to conferences and camps and churches and schools and wherever they'll hear the message. And I get to speak to a lot of teenagers, and I get to speak to a lot of parents as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely learning that this idea of a tutor is something parents are familiar with, and I think everyone watching can probably agree with that. But yet, when we step into that role of coach or mentor, I feel like that's something not as many parents are familiar with.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So I know we both kind of have unique perspectives on this. I know I'm very much in the academic world. I'm that nerd, all about study skills and all about learning, but I know what you do is just as important. So how does leadership kind of fit into this? Like, I think we all have a definition of what a leader is, but I know you have this kind of leadership identity, which I'm curious, is that like the same thing as a leader, or is like totally different?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that, because again, being a youth pastor for so long, and I directed a pretty large youth group. So over the years I worked with hundreds and hundreds of teenagers, and I kept seeing a trend over and over again that teenagers didn't consider themselves leaders. Sometimes you would put them in positions of leadership or give them some authority, and they could thrive in that, and that was great, and we loved doing that. But overall, the majority of teenagers just felt like leadership is something for adults. That's for parents and teachers and coaches and employers, and that's not for me. And a lot of parents tended to kind of embrace that idea as well. And when I started talking about the idea that all teenagers are leaders, some of the pushback I would get from parents, half joking, half serious. Well, Arthur, you haven't met my teenager. He or she is definitely not a leader. And I totally understand that response, because in fairness, our teenagers definitely do not always act like leaders. But also in fairness, our adults don't always act like leaders as well. And so we kind of went on a mission to help teenagers embrace a leadership identity. And that's a lot of what I've been speaking about lately.
Wow. Okay. So I want to kind of pick on you a little bit, Arthur, because I think about like one of the soft skills I teach is leadership, and like I kind of do it with the angle of public speaking, and I feel like you kind of have to be willing to be in the spotlight to be a leader, let alone do the public speaking, and then it makes me think about kind of the natural leaders. We've all heard that term a lot, that some of us were born to be leaders. So
Yeah.
how does that fit into us having a leadership identity?
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes we get in a position of leadership where someone physically says, all right, you're now the team captain, you're now the team coach or the team manager, you're whatever. You can get those positions of leadership, those positions of authority. And then sometimes, like you said, some people are just clearly, overtly natural born leaders. In any situation, they're going to be the leader. And those are kind of the two categories that we recognize the most: those who have been given leadership, and those who just exude leadership. And then there's kind of this third category where maybe they haven't been given any authority, and maybe they don't scream leader necessarily, but does that mean that they are not a leader? And the way that we define leader is the ability to influence other people. And so we have a three-part framework that we teach to our students, that we teach to our parents, that basically starts with the idea that you as a teenager have influence. And we have them think about your life. Who are the people you interact with on a daily basis? And who are the people that you have influence over? So as a teenager, it might be a sibling group, it might be a peer, it might be classmates, it might be coworkers. Who are those people that you have influence over? And what we find is every teenager can identify that they have someone that they have influence over. Now, they might feel like there's a lot more people that have influence over them, and that's okay, but they can at least identify some people they have influence over. And then when we define leadership as the ability to influence someone, we say, hey, you just acknowledged that you have influence, and influence is leadership. Ta-da, you are a leader. And that's the second part of our framework. First part, you have influence. Second part, you are a leader. And we talk about some different types of leadership within that framework. And then we get to more of the challenging part of it. So the first two pieces are kind of identity. You have influence, you are a leader. And then the third piece becomes you have a responsibility to be an extraordinary leader, and we have them think through some of the leaders in their life that they either know directly or they know of, nationally. And who are the leaders? What are some of those bad traits that they see in leaders throughout our country? And what are some of the great traits that they see in leadership throughout the country? So our goal is to kind of progress them through the idea that you have influence, you are a leader, and you have a responsibility to be an extraordinary leader.
Wow. Okay. I wonder what our parents that listen into this, Arthur, are going to think of that, because that totally changes my perspective on what a leader is, like 100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it, because when we think of leader, we think of a position of leader. We think of the authority of a leader, as opposed to just saying a leader is someone who can influence other people. And the bottom line is anyone can influence other people, meaning we all have a leadership identity within us that we can embrace even as a teenager.
Wow. I'm thinking about what you said about the three categories, because some of the students I work with, they tell me, like when we're talking public speaking, well, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'm good at it, but I don't want to do it. And so I think the same thing happens with leadership. Like you said, I mean, yeah, you have that influence, but are you going to do something with it? Or are you going to use it for almost like you said, the good or the bad, kind of how are you going to use this influence? And do we even acknowledge it if we know we have it?
Yeah, and that's a good point. Some of the students with whom I work, they don't want to embrace their leadership identity. They don't want to say, yes, I'm a leader, I'm going to now start leading. They're no, I'm good, Arthur. I'm fine with don't make me start embracing leadership. And one of the things we talk to them about as it relates to influence specifically is there's really three types of influence. There's unintentional influence, which is what a lot of us do, where we are influencing people in one way or the other. It might be positive, it might be negative, it might be neutral, but we're not giving any thought to it. Our very existence is influencing people in one way or the other, and it's completely unintentional. And for a lot of us, that's where we are. We're unintentionally influencing people. So a lot of these students who say, I don't want to be a leader, I've known it, it's like, sorry, buddy, you're already influencing people, whether you want to or not. And so that's unintentional influence. And then we have the two styles of intentional influence, where you want to positively influence people, or in some cases, and I've known some people like this, even when I was in school, I knew some kids like this, you want to negatively influence some people. I had a guy in one of my high school classes years ago, and he was a good kid, or at least that's what all the teachers thought. But his favorite thing was to get other people in the class to do stupid things, and then he would sit back and laugh and watch them get in trouble. And I always think when I'm talking about intentional negative influence, I always think about that guy. Like, he just thought it was so funny to be like, hey, you should go do this. And then when one of my peers went and did the thing that he said to do, he would just sit back and laugh. So those students that they say, I don't want to be leaders, well, they're going to influence people regardless of whether or not they want to be a leader. So they have to kind of answer that question. Well, do you want to have a positive, healthy influence, or do you want to have a negative influence?
Oh, okay. So I guess I wonder, Arthur, I mean, why is it so important for kids once they're teens to really understand this leadership concept? I mean, I think about, kind of the leaders of tomorrow, another kind of phrase that, I feel like it's kind of coined, but I mean, is there a reason that it should happen when they're 10 versus 16 or even younger or older?
Right. Yeah, I think there's a few different ways to look at that. One is just a very internal, individual perspective, where if I embrace a leadership identity, it's going to up level everything that I do. I'm going to be more confident. I'm going to be more intentional. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to embrace character traits of a positive, healthy leader. It's going to make me a better person by embracing a leadership identity. So that's kind of the individual perspective. But on a larger perspective, a generational perspective, even a global perspective, the more positive, healthy leaders that we have, even at a young age, is going to make the entire culture better. Can you imagine if we had an entire school of teenagers who embraced their identity as a positive, healthy leader? It would transform the school. It would transform the community. So even at the youngest of ages, to whatever degree they're able to even comprehend the idea of what a leader is and could they be a leader, it's going to make them better, and it's going to make the people around them better. So I think there's individual reasons, and there's more cultural, larger scale reasons.
Definitely. Definitely one of those topics I think is a little harder to teach in school too. I mean, it's one of those things where,
Yeah.
it's not as tangible. That's something I run into as a study skills tutor. Is it's like, okay, yeah, I can help them with this math homework, but that's one class, one assignment, and then we're done with it. Okay, he's good for how long until we run into a different concept. Whereas if we teach
Right.
him how to take better notes, that's going to help with every single concept, every single class. I feel
For
like
sure.
leadership is kind of the same way, right? That like you said, no matter if they only understand this concept now and then all of a sudden, oh, this is what influence means as a teen versus, a lot younger.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the idea of influence is maybe a little easier to grasp. So I think that's a good progression to go from, even at the youngest of age, you have influence. You can, as a little kid, I can still influence where we go out for dinner tonight. Yeah, still mommy and daddy are still in charge of where we go out for dinner. They're the authority figures in the situation. But as a little kid, I still have influence in what that decision is, assuming mommy and daddy give me that ability to influence. I think most parents, certainly the parents that would be connected with you, would give their children some level of influence over the decisions of the household, while still maintaining the authority of the household.
Definitely. I think that leads into a good point. I was just kind of wondering, something I always like to bring up in these interviews, Arthur, is that obviously we're talking to parents, but obviously, we both work with, well, I know I work directly with the teens. I think you do both from what we've talked about. But is there something particular that you wish parents of teens knew to do when it came to leadership, like when they're helping their kids kind of decide what type of leader to be? I mean, is there a way, I'm thinking about what you said with the kids that, had fun watching other kids get in trouble and make bad decisions. So is there something parents can do to kind of direct them or even help their kids figure out, this is the kind of leader I want to be?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that, because as important as it is for the teenagers to embrace a leadership identity, I would say it's equally as important, maybe even more important, that the parents embrace the idea that their teenager is a leader. And I alluded to this earlier, but I've had a lot of conversations with parents over the years. And as I talk about their teen and I build their teen up, a lot of times, not all the times, because I don't want to make a generalization about parents, but a lot of times they'll be real quick to say, oh, well, what you see in the coaching calls is different than what we see at home, or what, back when I was a youth pastor, what you see at youth group is completely different than what we see at home. And I don't doubt that that's true, but they tend to have sometimes a more negative idea of their teenagers. They put them down in front of people, and the idea that their teenager might be a leader seems kind of like crazy to some of them. And if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, actually, no, my teenager's a great leader, Arthur. That's awesome. Like, continue to encourage your teenager toward greatness. But if you're sitting here thinking like, Arthur, I kind of agree with some of those parents you were referring to, like, I don't know if my teenager is a leader, just start to think through the influence that your teen has in their life. And then how can you kind of start to guide them to use that influence for good and not for evil, like my friend in high school did.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely see that. I mean, I think even what you said earlier about picking dinner, I mean, I feel like that's something I say so many times in my lives. And probably so many of the parents that watch this in my Facebook group would be like, Jessica, you told us to model, model, model. And I was like, yeah, you have to involve your kids, your teens in these decisions. And yeah, I feel like parents are, more willing to be leaders. Their kids, their teens might be more willing to too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
So. Well, I know, Arthur, I have a whole bunch more questions, but at the same time, I try to keep these short and sweet. So, is there a question that I haven't asked you that you get from a lot of parents, or something that we should talk about?
Yeah, I think one of the things we kind of referred to, the fact that our teens, and this even does go even into child age. I work specifically with teenagers, so my verbiage is typically around teenagers. But we have an ability, they have an ability, I should say, to do something called leading up, which is a skill that is developed, but it's a skill that most people, especially teenagers, are not even aware of. And we used a small example of that with the idea that you could influence your parents on what you're going to have for dinner that night. But leading up is that the idea that, yes, you have people in a position of authority over you. That doesn't mean that you can't lead up to those people. So whether it's your parents, your coaches, your employers, your school teachers, whoever it is in your life that has a position of authority over you, that doesn't mean that you can't lead them. Now, they still have the authority. They get to make the decisions. We still lead up in a way that is respectful to them and acknowledging that they have that authority and they have that position. But we can lead up, or we can influence them. So I'd love to see more teenagers doing exactly that, where they can recognize that I can respectfully, in a positive, healthy way, lead the people who have been assigned to lead me. And that's a skill I'd love to see more teenagers develop.
Wow. I like that a lot, Arthur. I think about, not to steal thunder, but I'm like, okay, there's so many things that are connected with what you do and I do. And I'm like, this is why we're talking, because I teach self-advocacy. And I think about how many times I tell teens, I'm like, you can ask for whatever it is you want from mom, from dad, from a teacher, like you said, coach, or an employer, anybody. You can't guarantee you're going to get what you ask for. But yeah, there's a good way to ask and there's a bad way to ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I was a kid, I did not know the good way to ask. And so I would complain, I would get mad, I would do what a lot of little kids do, what sometimes a lot of teenagers do, sometimes what we adults do. And I didn't have good, positive ways of communicating what I wanted. And so I'm in the same boat with you, in that as I'm coaching students, I'm saying, well, what do you think your parents would say if you asked them? I don't know. They wouldn't let me do it. Well, what if you asked them? What if you went to them respectfully and just let them know what you want? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah, maybe they say no. Maybe they say yes.
Then you don't know until you ask. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
As simple as it is. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I know we haven't had too talkative of parents watching here, so Arthur, I'll definitely make sure I connect you and them if there's questions, and I'll make sure we get this over to my Facebook group where I thought it
Sure.
was gonna go. But I did want you to share your socials, your website, all that good stuff, since I know, we could talk for, another 20 minutes easily.
Oh, sure. Yeah, socials is easy. Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I'm at Arthur C. Woods, middle initial C, Arthur C. Woods. And then website is just arthurcwoods.com. So feel free to connect with me and follow what I'm doing. If you're interested in looking into having one-on-one or group coaching for your teenager, hit me up. I'd be happy to jump on a free call with you and we could talk about that. Or if you are part of an organization and your organization is looking for a speaker for their next event, whether it's speaking to teenagers or speaking to young adults or parents, shoot me an email about that as well. I'd be happy to engage in that conversation.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, Arthur, I know I definitely learned a lot, so thank you so much. And all our parents that are watching, thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties, and have an awesome day. And be sure to drop the word replay if you catch this as the replay instead of not being live. And if you've got questions, definitely connect with Arthur or put them down below in the comments. So thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.